Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I'd like to talk to you about lockdowns. Why? Well, perhaps you've seen it in the news, but a lot of countries are actually struggling a lot with keeping COVID-19 cases, deaths, and with that the COVID-19 virus in general under control. And you see that the spreading of the virus is going so much faster in so many countries that an important topic that's currently being discussed, being debated, is whether countries should reimpose lockdowns. So, months ago, actually, many countries already imposed lockdowns, and we actually saw a lot of success with this, right? You saw that people couldn't move freely amid a lockdown because they were, of course, forced to stay at home. And in such a situation, if you cannot move freely, it's of course also very difficult to spread the virus to someone else and to get someone else become sick, right? On top of this, many countries made sure that the lockdown period was much longer than the incubation period of the COVID-19 virus. And in such a situation, what you got is that you quite effectively and in a quite accurate way was able to diagnose who actually was ill and who is not. So two important benefits of lockdowns for people's health we've seen, and these are of course very strong arguments towards imposing national lockdowns. If we see such success with these lockdowns, then why is it still so difficult for countries to impose lockdowns? And why do we need so vivid, so long-lasting discussions about whether to impose a lockdown? That's the question on your mind, I suppose. And the reason behind this is that, of course, countries, governments are trying to balance two important things. One is human health, and we talked about that, right? Population's health, people's health is so important. Of course, you cannot neglect this. But on the other side of things, countries, governments also have to think about the economy, because the economy indirectly, of course, also affects people's life quality so much that the economy is something that also needs to be balanced with people's health and people's health quality. So let's break this open. So if you think about the economy, if you think about the lockdown, what happens with the lockdown on the effect of the economy is that, of course, people have to stay at home, right? So they can only do digital purchases. Well, research has shown that people are going to spend much less digitally than they would normally do physically. And this already means that companies are going to be able to sell only much less. On top of this, certain things can only be physically consumed, right? You can only go physically to a theme park, only can go physically to a museum if you want to get the same experience as you normally got when you did your physical purchases. On top of this, we also have the psychological argument, right? I mean, people are going to be afraid of perhaps losing their jobs, right? Or perhaps of needing the money in the future because they don't know how severely the economy is going to be affected. They're basically afraid that their purchasing power is going to decrease, so they might spend much less because of that, and they might go in saving mode. If you take all of this together, well, it is not that difficult to understand that companies are going to sell much less products and services. And with this, of course, they're going to have much less revenues, and with this, much less income. And, they're not able to reduce their costs that much. And amid such a situation, what you're going to see is a lot of companies are going to turn loss-making. Already months ago, we saw that actually many companies went bankrupt in such a situation. And of course, the country had to jump in. It had to give a lot of loans or had to give a lot of free money, stimulus checks and whatever to keep companies alive. But you can only do this so much, and because of that, a lot of the lockdowns are only temporary of nature. And what you then see, if you have a temporary lockdown, well, we saw it, we had months ago a lockdown, but after the lockdown was abolished, we now see again the virus coming alive, and we see again the virus spreading much faster. Then the question is, how permanent and how long-lasting is going to be the effect of a lockdown? If it is not going to be long-lasting, if it is not going to be permanent, the effect, then why should we impose a lockdown that's going to affect the economy so much? And why should we not have something like a controlled society? With this is meant that you go for only partial lockdowns, right? For example, you will only have lockdowns in the weekend. You can think of curfews, right? You can think of restrictions in terms of how many people can be in shops. You can think of restrictions in terms of, when restaurants and when amusement places are going to close. So a lot of these are, of course, much more a partial version, a much more restricted, limited version of a lockdown. But at the same time, something that is going to benefit the economy much more. The economy will be ongoing, even though there will still be some restrictions, and with that the economy will still be affected to some extent. But on the other side, you will still be able to think about people's health. You will still not just leave the country completely uncontrolled. There will be some important restrictions of people's movement, and with that, on how the virus is being spread to one another, and with that, on the extent to which the virus can be kept under control. And that's the debate. Should we go for a full lockdown, a partial lockdown, or no lockdown at all? And many countries are actually going for the partial version, simply to be able to balance the economy with health. Now, one thing that you could have said also as an argument perhaps is that, we have had lockdowns months ago. Why not just do another one? And if the effects of this one fade away, we will go for another lockdown months later. I mean, we saw some serious positive effects of the lockdown of months ago. Let's do it again. And, sure, but one thing that you have to consider here is that with the previous lockdown, what we saw that, many companies barely kept standing. Many families also barely were able to meet the needs for a month. And amid such a situation, when the previous lockdown was abolished and was turned back to the normal situation, a lot of companies actually again started to do their investments, started to hire people again, started to again bring their inventories to their normal levels, because they thought there wouldn't be another lockdown, right? So a lot of companies currently are not prepared for another lockdown because they simply didn't think that another one would come. And a lot of families also have been so much affected in terms of purchasing power, in terms of economic situation, that they are not able to face another lockdown without being able to get, of course, a lot of economic support. And in such a situation, perhaps a second lockdown is going to be much more difficult to accomplish than the first one, because economies' reserves are depleted to some extent, companies' reserves are depleted to some extent, families' reserves are depleted. But also, if you think in terms of motivation, in terms of people's wanting and people's mental ability to brace themselves for another lockdown, it's actually going to be very, very difficult to make the case that the second lockdown is going to be as easy and as effective as the first one. Amid all of this, of course, the discussion of whether to go for a full lockdown, a partial lockdown, or for no lockdown at all is a matter of looking at one country's country-specific context, the idiosyncrasies related to just that country, and weighing that country's situation case by case, and looking at not only the willingness of the population, but at the same time the amount of cases that are around, the need for another lockdown, yes or no, the health situation, the economic situation, and only looking at all of this at the same time and bringing all of the pieces of the puzzle together, a good decision can be made around whether there should be another lockdown, yes or no. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. I wish you all the best in the world and hope to see you again anytime soon. Take care. All the best.